Well, good morning and welcome to Terry Third Thursday. I'm John O'Neill with Cushman & Wakefield, and I'm also a member of the Terry College Alumni Board. We've got a terrific program planned for you this morning with what I think probably one of the absolute best global CEOs in Ed Bastian. So, Ed, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us this morning. John Schrodenbach will give Ed a formal intro here in a minute, but thank you as well to our corporate sponsor, Synovus. Synovus has been a great partner to Terry Third Thursday over the years, so let's give them a round of applause, please. And we have two media sponsors, AJC and Public Broadcasting Atlanta, WABE, so let's give our media sponsors a round of applause, please. So, two items you need to mark your calendars on. So next month, Steve Fisher, CEO of Novellus, will be our speaker for the Terry Third Thursday. And then in May, a coach, Kirby Smart, I'm not sure if anyone knows Kirby. So in May, Coach Smart will be with us. So mark your calendars for those two exciting programs. So we're going to do a little bit of a fireside chat, sans fire here. Is that all right, John? But John Schrodenbach, who probably is friends to many of you in the room. He's a senior leader at EY, has held several leadership positions with the firm in the Southeast and in the Americas region. He's a former audit partner for Delta, so he understands the industry a little bit, so be careful, Ed. And now he's the audit partner. That's right. Be careful, John, exactly. And now is the audit partner at Genuine Parts. But he is also the former chair of the Terry College Alumni Board. So let's give John Schrodenbach a warm
Great to be here, and what an honor to be able to interview a great leader and a great friend in Ed Bastian. As John mentioned, I was the audit partner on Delta for 5 years, but my roots actually go back a lot farther than that. I grew up in South Atlanta and actually worked summers for Delta in college, and that's how I got through college, was working for Delta. So it was amazing to get to come back around to that.
Maybe you still have a future doing that.
Yeah,
John.
no,
Get you out on the ramp this summer.
Well, I'm afraid I've long passed those days that the old back won't hold up. But so what I'm going to do in just a minute is allow Ed to tell in his own words about his career. Kind of walk you through that. I always love to hear how people of great success got to where they are and some of the inflection points in their career. But before we do that, just a few data points. So a lot of us take Delta for granted, right? It's been in Atlanta a long time. I know, like many of you, the highlight of any of my trips is seeing Ed on the video before you take off. Clearly the most viewed CEO in all of corporate America. But, you know, step back and think about what Delta is. $40 billion of revenue makes it Fortune 60-ish, 50-ish. $5.7 billion in pre-tax profit. 80,000 employees around the world, and I know one of Ed's proudest things is every year they pay out a profit sharing to those 80,000 employees. And this year they paid out $1.1 billion in profit sharing to those employees.
Thank you.
180 million.
And we're taking applications at the door.
Yeah, I think you'll have a lot of them. But 180 million passengers they fly every year. Imagine moving that many people. 306 destinations, 50 countries. This was always interesting to me, 4 billion gallons of fuel a year. So imagine that, 4 billion gallons of fuel. Stock price is up 400% since 2012, so just an amazing success. And then you look beyond that, you look at some of the recognitions the company's had. Wall Street Journal named them the #1 airline. The Business Travel Managers and Agents, so this is a survey of the folks that book travel and arrange travel. They have 10 categories in their survey, and Delta ranks #1 in every one of those 10 categories and has for, I think, 6 or 7 years.
7 years, don't cut it short.
7 years. Fortune, most admired airline, and just really too many diversity and best places to work awards to even name when you go out and look. So truly have created an unbelievable company in terms of volume, performance, and the way they treat their people and others. So with that, Ed, if you could just take a few minutes and walk everybody through sort of your career path, how you got to where you are, and maybe some key inflection points that might be helpful to the group to think about.
I'm not quite sure how I got here. I graduated from college, a small school in Western New York, St. Bonaventure, playing tonight in the tournament. They won the other night. First victory they had in 45 years, so I was pretty excited about that in the tournament. And grew up in upstate New York, small town, Poughkeepsie, New York. One of 9 kids, oldest of 9 kids, so I had to get out of the house fast. So I left home at 18, and really haven't been back since. Don't have any advanced degree or pedigree. I got my undergrad in business administration, went to work for an accounting firm, Price Waterhouse, that when they were Price Waterhouse versus the Cooper's tag. And us old PW guys still have a hard time saying PwC, but I'm sure we have some PwC folks in the room. It's a great firm. In New York, and I spent about 12 years there, made partner there after about 10 years. I was 31, and I was way too young to feel like I kind of hit the top of my career. So I was recruited at that point to go work for, PepsiCo in Atlanta. I always say Pepsi with a small P. You never want to say it too loud, but it was really Frito-Lay, the salty snack company more so that I worked. Spent about 6 years there in Dallas, was recruited to come to Atlanta as the corporate controller. I was still in the finance world at that time. And so I've been here at Delta now 20 years. Left the company in 2004 after, as many of you are familiar, we went through a really tough spell following 9/11 and all the challenges we faced and the reductions that were being made, and candidly the company had lost its way in a very meaningful manner. And I left and went to work for a company here in town, Acuity Brands, and Vern Nagel, a good friend, and good Atlanta company. And after about 6 weeks, I was pretty bored. You get the jet fuel racing through your veins in the airline industry, and it's just tough. It's tough to compare it to other industries, I have to say. And fortunately, I got a call from Jerry Grinstein. He asked me to come back and be the chief financial officer, lead the restructuring. We went through a bankruptcy process in 2005, came out in 2007. And from there, we bought Northwest Airlines the year after, merged them, and today we're pretty close to the largest airline in the globe. We're neck and neck with American Airlines. We're both about the same size. 43 billion in revenues we'll hit this year. So it's been a great story. I'd say from myself, a couple of the inflection points is certainly when I left Delta. It was a hard decision to make, but you had to follow your instinct and follow your hesitate to use the word values. It's been overused in the last couple of weeks around me, but it was something
we'll get to that.
Yeah, I know. But it was the company was making decisions I didn't want to be part of, and it was hard to watch, and so I felt like I needed to go someplace. And one of the lessons in that, they called me back within a matter of months to come back. And one lesson, sometimes when you have your voice not being heard inside the organization, sometimes the loudest voice you can have is when you take up and you exercise your voice and you go do something different. And then people pay attention to that more so than what they look at internally. And then at Delta, I'd say one of the most important things that we pride ourselves on, and you'll hear a lot from me this morning, is people. It's the people that have been around me, my mentors, my friends, my family, my community, my church, that really has brought me up and continues to bring me up. You never actually stop growing. You continue to grow and you continue to develop. And I still have an awful lot to learn. This is my 3rd year as CEO of Delta, and I look forward every day to going seeing what I'm going to learn. And it's a learning process, even at our old advanced ages, John.
You're a year older than me. You look a lot better, but you are a year old.
Get out on the ramp, John. We can work on that.
He's training for a marathon currently, so
yeah.
He's in great shape. So, yeah. Well, let's take that. You mentioned the bankruptcy, roughly 10-ish years ago. Let's talk about how you have come from there to here as a company.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, it's a bit of a distant memory, but the company needed to go through a restructuring process. Had gotten way over levered on debt, and needed and Chapter 11 is not, there's no shame attached to it. It's a legal process. It gives us all a second chance to make it work, and we all need a second chance in life many times, and it's a corporate opportunity to have a second chance, but you have to make the most of it, which is what we did. One of the things that I think has gotten Delta to where we are now, and today it's always interesting when you speak to your hometown people because they don't fly a lot of the other airlines a lot. So when John says that we all take Delta, including our people at Delta take Delta a little bit for granted, when you compare us to what the other airlines around the globe are doing, it's really remarkable. This past year in 2017, we had 242 days of the year without a cancellation. Just think about that. And that's more than twice all of our competitors combined had. It's really something. So, but it wasn't always like that, as everyone knows. You don't go bankrupt by making a lot of smart decisions. We made a lot of dumb decisions, and we're our own worst enemy at times. And that was one of the big inflection points for us at our company in 2007 as we came out. We said we have to fix the product. We have to fix the service reliability and the operational performance. And we've been investing for 10 years to get to this level of performance across the company. And when you do that, it's amazing because the employees can actually start to serve, and they feel delighted to be able to welcome customers rather than having to apologize as to what's going wrong. They can actually see what they can do to actually make their day a little bit better. And at Delta, we've always prided ourselves in having the very best people in the industry, certainly from a hospitality and a service mindset. That's how we hire people, is people that we see that have a true heart of service. And it's the same people today, many of them at Delta, that were there back 15, 20, 25 years ago. And how when you give them a product to actually use and serve and sell, the difference was stunning how quickly it came around. So that was a big part of it. I think another big part of it for us is focus on the business traveler. Delta back then and 10 years ago was a relatively small airline by global standards. We didn't have much of an operation in New York. We had a handful of gates at LaGuardia Airport. Today, we are the largest airline in New York City by a good measure. We have 500 departures a day out of New York between LaGuardia and JFK. We have half of LaGuardia and pretty close to half of JFK as well in terms of departure count. That was a big focus point for us. We've expanded in LA. We're building out new facilities in LA, and we're going to be the largest or close to the largest airline in LA. Seattle, we've got a big expansion. We're up 5x in Seattle in just the last 5 years. So we've really branched out and expanded our domestic operations to where the business centers are and where the big population centers are. And so right now we are the leading business, along the lines you mentioned, winning the award 7 times. And then finally, after doing that, then we expanded internationally, and we've invested in many of the leading airlines around the world. We own 10% of Air France KLM. We own 49%, the largest owner of Aeromexico, our Mexican affiliate. We're basically running that company, not for accounting purposes, John, but for airline purposes. You're not on the account anymore.
No.
You missed that one. Virgin Atlantic, the London airline, we own 49% of Virgin Atlantic, and Richard Branson's our good partner and dear friend, and we've invested in a Chinese airline, China Eastern, and Brazil and Gold, and we continue to expand the opportunities to grow our services around the world, because from a U.S. standpoint, our marketplace is largely mature. There's not new cities to fly to. We're building new airports. We're building bigger aircraft to take more throughput, but there's not new places to go fly. And if you think about our business for 10, 20, 30, 40 years out, it's a global marketplace, and that's why we got to be around the world. And we're investing and sending a lot of our people to go work in those operations to develop the skills and live and work in the regions, and then come back to. And we right now have over 100 people at Delta that live in different parts of the world, and we're going to double that this year, and then double it again the year after. And we're actually bringing people from those countries into Atlanta to train them up on the airline industry as well. So it's an exciting time.
Yeah. So you mentioned the international flights and all the things you've done with your partners. What's next? What areas have you not gotten into internationally, and are there some areas where there's still holes?
Yeah, there are a few areas that are still holes. First off, we've made a lot of investments. We've got to continue to expand and invest in them. The international marketplace has been choppy. Anyone here that works in a global business knows that. It's been tough. The currencies have been moving against us. The economies have been slow. There's a lot of economic angst out in the marketplace. It's stabilizing. We're seeing some good progress. This year it's going to be the first year that we grow our international business. We'll be up probably about 3-4% international revenues this year, and I see the next several years having similar trends. So we're back in growing. One place that we don't fly to, we used to fly to, we don't fly to anymore, is India. We need to fly to India, and we're going to make plans to get into India. Another place from Atlanta that we've tried in the past that hasn't worked is China direct, and we're going to be launching, and this time it will work because we've got a good partner in Shanghai, but this summer we'll be launching a direct flight from Atlanta to Shanghai. So any of you interested in seeing what the future of the world is, certainly on a global commerce standpoint, go to Shanghai. It's remarkable. As a kid from New York, I call it the new New York because everywhere you go, it's bustling with activity and 100-story buildings and incredibly dynamic and exciting part of the globe. And we're going to be launching that direct from Atlanta this summer.
It's great. Well, as you hear over and over again, the foresight of Hartsfield and Ivan Allen and some of the others to build the airport here, who could have ever thought it would grow into what it's grown into, and then for Delta to be at the center of that is really, in my estimation, is what has put Atlanta on the map, has allowed us to attract all these Fortune 500, 1,000 companies that move in, because there's no easier place to travel from than Atlanta and Delta.
Yeah, and to that point, it's hard to see a lot of young faces in the room. People may not recall, but 50 years ago, when the big investments were being made in Hartsfield-Jackson, and Mayor Hartsfield decided to expand Atlanta and build Atlanta and the airport as the center of global commerce for the Southeast, Atlanta and Birmingham, Alabama were the same size. Now, no offense to anyone here from Birmingham, but you just think about that. That's the power of the airport. It's the power of the airport.
Yeah, foresight was amazing. So talk a minute about, we talked about your 80,000 people and how you look for a servant attitude when you hire. But then how do you train, any special ideas on training, because you're touching customers every day. You got flight attendants, reservation, gate agents, all these people touching customers. What kind of training and development do you do to keep that customer focus?
Well, training is as much a part of the business as anything, and we've got training academies within the Delta campus, and at any point in time we have thousands of people in school. Training on technical skills and maintaining their currency, whether it's pilots or flight attendants or maintenance workers or the technologists. Training around service. I think one of the things that we've done through Delta that's been very, very successful is a high level of employee engagement. You think about our business model. Most of our employees don't show up in an office and come to work every day in the same place where people can keep their eye on them. These are self-directed individuals. We allow them, to take an asset, an airplane, a $100 million airplane, and fly it around the world and for 3 or 4 days with a couple hundred people on it and return it in one piece. Could you imagine that? And doing that many thousands of times a day. So you have to have trust in your people, and you need to give them the tools to do their job, but also the backing to make decisions. We were all kind of just watching our friends in Chicago continue to stumble. The crazy thing about their service, but there's a cultural issue and up there in Chicago, and at Delta, culture is our number one. We this past year, I've spent a lot of time with Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great, and a good friend of mine, as well as I think the foremost author around leadership, in that he doesn't actually go out and sell a leadership style. He's a research scientist and has studied what has worked I tell you, one of the books I read 15 years ago that really changed how I thought about leadership was his Good to Great, original. And I just read that again for the 4th time. He's fabulous, and he came and spoke to our leadership event. We hold our top 4,000 people. We bring them together a couple times a year. And this past September, he came and spent half a day with us for a couple days, taking us through his view on Delta, because from Delta's standpoint, we're at the top of our game industry-wise. We're the most profitable airline in the globe. We made $5.5 billion this past year. The number 2 airline in the globe made $3 billion. So we made twice as much as any airline in the globe made. And it's not because our fares are higher, and fares are incredibly competitive. It's because of the productivity, the efficiency, and the premium that people pay because they want to be on Delta over some of the other guys. And so what my task to Jim is that, we're at the top of a mountain, but I don't want to be at the top of a mountain. It's very uncomfortable. There's only one place to go but down. I'm looking for the next hill, the next mountain to climb, and keep climbing, as you know, is our tagline, and it's always going to be the tagline as long as I'm in charge, because that is our theme. That's where we're looking to go. And he has studied Delta. He spent a lot. He said Delta, and this is a guy he's a research scientist. He's hard. People talk about strategy, business strategy. It sounds very complex. It sounds very sophisticated. He says at Delta, your strategy is your culture. It is your culture. That's your strategy. And I never thought about it. I never felt permission to say that out loud until that point, because it sounds so soft. But it absolutely is. Our strategy is our culture, because it's our people. Our planes are not our best assets. Our people are our best assets. And letting them shine and let them grow and develop and serve all of you is what they do best. And the better the job they do, the better job we'll do. And the better job I do serving our people, the better job they'll do serving everyone. So it really does boil down to people. And as a result of that, from the top, what I spend most of my time doing these days are events all around the place. A lot of employee engagement, big events, hundreds, if not thousands of people at a setting, 4, 5, 6 times a week, all over our system. Because people want the touch point. People want to see what's happening. They want to engage. They want to know, where we're going. They want to know that they've got the leadership in the company in the back of the leader that's going to protect them going out into the world and making this business hum the way it does hum. A lot of social engagement. It's been new for me, doing a lot of social media, but we do a lot of internal social media, but we're continuing to branch out in other forms. And I'll post a number of videos. I don't know how to post anything, honestly. My good friend Trevor is my. If you want to see who's my external person, it's Trevor Vance. That's better. But the postings and the internal videos that we operate, and people can kind of see and hear and think where you're going. So it's a very, very much about culture, very much around engagement, very much around getting people excited about where we continue to climb to, rather than where we've climbed from.
Yeah. Well, I know I found it very interesting. When I went on the engagement, I know one of your real pet peeves was to make your balance sheet investment grade.
Yep.
And I was a doubter, I have to say, for where you were then. When I looked at it, it's like, how is this going to work out? Maybe talk a little bit about the importance of that and how you accomplished it. It was pretty incredible to watch.
Well, it requires a lot of discipline. We weren't all that successful. We've made $5 billion before in the past. Well, unfortunately, had brackets around it. So we threw out the bracket machine. We got rid of the bracket machine, and we decided no more brackets around our numbers. There's just going to be positive numbers. But when you have years of losses, as we had accumulated a lot of debt. Even after the restructuring, we still had a lot of debt on our balance sheet, and I think we topped out somewhere around $20 or $22 billion of debt in 2009-ish, 2010. And we said, we just can't take on any more debt. We just had to stop this craziness. And we said in arbitrary, I kind of, people ask me how I just kind of made up a number. I said, our debt needs to be $10 billion, not $20 billion. It's just, people kept asking me, how do you, I don't know, it just sounds better. Honestly, that's God's honest truth. We got to get to $10 billion, we got to do it over 3-4 years. And if you say it long enough, people start to believe it. And, but to execute that and implement, what we did is a fairly simple strategy, is that for every dollar of cash we make in the company, and we still use it to this day, we take 50 cents of that dollar and we put it back in the business, reinvest in the business, in our planes, our people, our technology, our airports, the things that we're going to have a pipeline of investment for. And the other 50 cents, at that point, we weren't buying stock or anything, we were just paying down debt. We were going to pay down debt, and today we're still paying down a little bit of debt, but also buying back stock and paying a dividend and the like, investing in your owners. Half of it goes back and goes to the future, Half of it goes to your capital structure, pay down debt and solidify your future. And today, our debt levels are down to about $8 billion, and arguably too low. People tell us we need to take on more debt. We're under-levered. I don't believe there is such a thing. And we're looking to continue to reduce our debt even more at this point. But that simple formula is going to allow us this year to invest at an all-time high. We're going to invest over $4 billion in our business this year. We're going to have $8 billion of cash flow. And we're going to invest, so we're buying 70 new airplanes this year, all big airplanes, all mainline airplanes. We're going to spend $500 million around technology this year in terms of capital, investing in technology, because we got to digitize this airline. We got to personalize the airline and the touch points. We're going to spend probably close to $1 billion in our airports this year. So a lot of investments for the future, but we never would have been in position to do that if we didn't get our balance sheet in order to plan for the future. And then the investment grade was just the benefit of it. We did get all of our 3 investment grade ratings back, and I'll tell you, it's hard once you lose an investment grade rating to get it back, because the credit agencies, once burned, aren't going to give it back to us. We were investment grade on 9/11, and we wound up losing it, of course, and getting it back was hard earned, and we're never going to lose it again.
Well, and the ability to borrow at the rates you now can get as investment grade just gives you that much more to plow into the business.
We just borrowed $400 million, not that we're looking to borrow, but it's really more for refinancing to pay down other debts. It was a European offering that we were able to effectively get. Our interest rate was like 20 basis points on $400 million. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Free money, eh?
You know, it
Well,
kind of is.
And you,
kind of is.
you know, those years too, as you were paying down debt, some of the massive investments you were making at LaGuardia and JFK, and how do you assess that? I mean, you're going to go in and spend multi-billions of dollars to rework an airport.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about how that investment decision's made.
Well, we know we're the ultimate long game. You know, our assets last at least 30 years. Our airplanes, our airports last much longer than that. Our technologies, while they're younger, they continue. They're stable, and they've got to invest, you know, in technology for the future. And so you're always looking at the long-term, you know, opportunities as compared to how do you justify a short-term investment decision. Not all the investment decisions are going to work out. There's obviously some that aren't going to work out. But the majority,
somebody else came up with those, right?
Somebody else, exactly.
Yeah.
But you know, listen, I also believe if you're not, you know, if everything's working, you're not trying hard enough. You know, you got to keep pushing the envelope and challenge your team and challenge yourself. And you know, some things aren't going to work, and it's okay, because you get smarter. You get smarter from the things that don't work than the things that work. When the things that work, you just affirm yourself. When you get something that doesn't work, you learn from that. And you know, that's why I continue to push our team to break a few things here and there and push the envelopes a little bit more, take a chance. It's actually one of the biggest challenges I have in the business. People say, what are your challenges today? Is back 10 years ago, we didn't have to worry about it. Was already broken. You know, it was a very low bar back then, and it was easy to take chances, because you know, if it didn't work, what's the alternative? But today, when you're sitting on top of where we're sitting, you know, your risk appetite's a lot lower, because you got a lot higher threshold in terms of the returns and the expectations. So it's good. But we do have a long-term strategy about fleet replenishment, airport renewal. Airports in our country, we're in the midst, and Delta specifically is in the midst of a multi-generational rebuild of our air traffic systems. Our airports, air traffic control needs, and that's the government more so than the airlines, but we have a hand in that. And we are rebuilding LaGuardia Airport together with Governor Cuomo in New York. And so 60 years ago when LaGuardia was built, and obviously what it was built for is nothing close to what we operate today. Hartsfield, Jackson here, we're in the midst of a $20 billion master plan to renovate Hartsfield, Jackson, and eventually build a 6th runway and additionally build additional concourse facilities. But the first phase of that is to renovate the domestic terminals. And you see as you go through the domestic terminals, you see the progress we're making. It's going to take another year before we get it, but they're all going to be, you go through T concourse today, it looks like a modern airport. Well, that's, you know, the bones in that are pretty old. But but you got to keep it modern, you got to keep it fresh. You got to bring technology to bear in that. We're rebuilding LA. LA, we were at a constrained airport. We moved last year into Terminals 2 and 3 in LA. We're going to double our footprint in LA, but we have to rebuild it because the situation it was in. Salt Lake City, we got a brand new airport we're putting up. So we're investing in all these, and what I tell our team all the time is we've got to make sure we're not building the airports of what we know now. We got to build the airports for what's going to come in the future. We're investing heavily in biometrics. That's going to, when you think of the pinch points in air travel, it's increasingly now turned into the airport experience, whether it's the going through security, going through that scrum, trying to get on board. Everyone wants to get on at the same time with their bags, and it looks like a kid's soccer game, following the ball, everybody trying to get there at the same time. We got to bust those queues. We got to find better ways to manage. Biometrics, we invested in a company called Clear, and anyone that does not have Clear, I suggest you get Clear. And people that have Clear will tell you, it will change your airport experience. It takes you down to basically you get through airports consistently in about 10 minutes, getting through security all the time. And if you're a frequent flyer on Delta, you get a big discount on it since we own a chunk of it. And if you're not, you need to become a frequent flyer on Delta. But whether you are a frequent flyer or not, you can still sign up for Clear. It's not that expensive. And it's a biometric entry, and it puts you right to the top of the queue, and you go right through the pre-check line. We're using that to get into our sky clubs. We're using that to kind of access more and more of, and by the way, it's not just faster, it's also more safer because it's more effective because people know who it is, and rather than some guard kind of comparing your ID to your face and looking at you and seeing if you're on a wanted list or something. I mean, it's not the most efficient way to manage and try to keep the bad guys out of the air systems. We're at the gate level. We're doing a lot of work to try to break out the scrum around the boarding process, and we're putting people now in lines, which I hate, and I've been a holdout for that. They finally convinced me we're going to try the lane process, but we're not going to stay there. We're going to keep moving. We need to, as we're rebuilding these airports, we need to build much bigger gate holds and much fewer, smaller head houses. You think about the airports of the past. The head houses were grandiose, and they were big statements about the city and the area you were coming to, and people used to congregate there, and then they kind of just board the airplane through kind of an efficient gating process, because no one ever wanted to get and sit on an airplane seat for longer than they have to. That's the old days. But now with bag fees and some of the challenges, everybody wants to bring their bags on. We have to create a much larger gate hold space and much smaller head house, because people don't hang out in the head house anymore. They hang out by the gates or the amenities or the sky clubs or the restaurants. And so that's what we're doing to change it up. We've invested a lot in RFID technology. We've put $100 million into RFID technology. So now on the Delta app, and again, I'm sure many of you do that, you can track your bag, you can follow your bag, through the process. You can see where it's sitting, you can watch it unload, you can watch it, and so if people knew where their bag was at all times and had confidence it was going to be there when they landed, they'd never want to try to take their bag and cram it into the overhead space it's much easier to manage that way. So a lot of things for the future that we're investing on the airport side.
Yeah, great. You mentioned taking a risk, and probably the biggest risk that I watched you take while I was there was buying a refinery. Airlines, totally out of the airline business, totally out of the space. Refineries themselves were struggling at the time, which is why you were able to get a good price on it. Mm-hmm. But boy, you talk about going outside the box. That was huge, and it was a big risk. Mm-hmm. Talk about how you assess that and then how it's worked, what the benefits have been.
Well, and as you say, $4 billion of fuel that we buy a year is our biggest, second to our people, it's our biggest cost. And we looked at ways that we needed to purchase jet fuel cheaper than we were paying today. Back 5 years ago, crude prices were over $100 a barrel. People forget that. It wasn't that long ago. It was over 100. Today it's 60. A couple years ago it was 40. And I think it's probably going to hang out in that 60 to 70 range. But for the airlines, it wasn't just a $100 price that we were paying for jet fuel. It was costing us $25 a barrel to refine it. So we were paying actually $125 a barrel, and there was no reason why we had to pay that extra refinery cost of $25. So we said we had to find a better way to reduce our highest input cost. People talked about it at the time of being a huge risk. It was a risk, and that it's a big refinery. It's 200,000 barrels a day that we refine, and it's a large refinery, over 100 years old. And it's a refinery that had been closed. We were able to reopen it. It's a great human story, not just a great business story. And once we were able to turn it back on, as a lot of the refineries on the East Coast were being closed. We were able to actually increase the amount of jet fuel supply in the market because everybody was being priced out, the refineries were being priced out to be able to afford to make it. And we increased the amount of jet fuel supply in the Northeast by 40%. And anytime you increase supply by 40% in any market, prices came tumbling down. So we took our refinery, tweaked it to make as much jet fuel as we can. We pushed it into the New York Harbor, and prices have come down, and we've made hundreds of millions of dollars just on that market dynamic alone over the years. And on top of that, we've also made money at the refinery. And it cost us $150 million. Now, $150 million is a lot of money, but when you spend close to $10 billion a year on jet fuel, I didn't think it was a big risk at all. I mean, people thought it was brave and bold, and I say you wouldn't even know. You couldn't even find 150 million in a 10 billion. I mean, again, these are big numbers, but to me, it was a bit of a rounding difference in whether it was going to work or not.
Well, it's worked great. It's been well received.
I'm glad we proved you wrong there, John.
Oh no, I didn't question that.
Yeah.
It was your investment grade balance sheet I didn't buy. You did. So let's shift gears for a minute here, because I think there is no better corporate citizen in Atlanta, and I know you're this way in your other hubs that you're in, than Delta. Talk a minute about why that's important to Delta and to you personally, because I know it's very important to you personally as well, and what it means to the company, both from a morale perspective and a business perspective.
Yeah. Well, we realized that we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all of you. Our communities, our customers are one and the same. And as we've gone through our own restructuring, our own rebuild, building the company to where we're at today, a lot of people stood by our side. A lot of people believed in us. A lot of people were willing to kind of invest in Delta with their business and continuing to keep us going, and gave us a lot of encouragement. And now that we've made it to the other side, and then our employees particularly have gotten paid well through the profit sharing arrangement, which 4 years in a row, in fact, we've paid over $1 billion to our, we've also, by the way, we haven't found a corporation anywhere in the globe that's paid $1 billion once, and we've now done it 4 years in a row. A couple of years ago, it occurred to us that we should have profit sharing for our communities as well. Basically for our customers, people that we live with and work with and go to church with and do life with, because they're part of this story too. So I was actually proud. It was the first decision I made as CEO a couple of years ago, was that 1% of our profits at Delta are going to go back to our communities. And we pay it, and we kind of made that decision when we did the profit sharing a couple of years ago. And so right now, this past year in 2017, we paid over $40 million of cash into our communities. And we've always been philanthropic, but it's been more so in the time and the energy we invest to the community, not as much backed by long-term financial commitments. And we've done some great things in our charities, whether it's Habitat, whether it's breast cancer research, whether it's junior achievement. There's an enormous amount of charities in Atlanta as well as other parts of the globe that we support and invest in, can see that we're going to be there for the long term. These are not annual grants. They know Delta's going to be there for the very long term. And it makes our employees feel great about giving back. It reinforces the commitment, and our customers love the fact that we get very engaged. And that's why one of the things we profile in our magazine and the videos on board is the heart of giving that we have at Delta. I think I'm a firm believer in you get back what you give, and we've gotten a lot. We need to return a lot.
Yeah, well, you're everywhere, and I know you've done the Delta House up in Washington for the journalism school at the University of Georgia.
Yeah, we have.
It's affectionately called Delta House.
Yeah.
So even giving back into Georgia
we're proud of our support of UGA, and it's one of the top sponsorships we have around the world is UGA. And that's not going to change.
Well, we appreciate it.
I've got another daughter yet to go through college yet. So.
Yeah, I know another. We mentioned earlier the 4 billion gallons of fuel you go through a year. But yet I know you are a leader in environmental issues. Mm-hmm. So, and I know that's the corporate responsibility around that is something that you and Delta take great pride in. Talk a little about what you do to really reduce that, what could be just a massive footprint.
Sure, sure. Well, we committed several years ago to reduce our environmental footprint by 2% a year, every year for the next 10 years, looking out. And so, and there's very few companies around the world that have made that public commitment, and we're right on track with delivering that. We're doing lots of things, certainly through recycling, through efficiency measures, we're generating returns. We're also, all the new aircraft we're buying are substantially more fuel efficient. The Airbus 321, which is our latest model, is 20% more fuel efficient than the MD-80s, which we're retiring. The Airbus 350, which we've just launched, our newest international airplane, is 25% more fuel efficient per customer than the 747 that we're retiring. We're getting rid of, I know this breaks your heart particularly, we're getting rid of all the 50-seat regional jets. Back in 2009, Delta's largest fleet, we fly 1,200 planes every day. That's our fleet size. Our largest fleet at that point was the 50-seat regional jet. We had 500 of those. We're down to 100 of those.
Which I didn't fit in, by the way.
I know. Even back then. But we're getting rid of those so that you can fly in comfort that you need to be. And as our customers hate it, by the way, our employees hate it because some other regional airline was flying them for us. So we've done that. We've also, you can go on the Delta website and you can volunteer to have your own personal footprint compensated for and eliminated, and we'll plant trees and invest in the Conservancy Fund, which we do as a partner of ours, to offset your own personal flying footprint. So we'll take your flying history and we'll plant trees, and we'll work with the Conservancy Fund to reinvest. So any of you folks that feel culpable somehow for what you use, you have the opportunity to do that. We've been doing that for a number of years. I think we're the only airline actually that does that. So it is a big part of corporate social responsibility in lots of ways, is something that we've got to continue to take care of.
Okay, well, one more question, then we're going to open it up to the group here. And if anybody wants to ask why the app no longer works on an iPad, you could ask that. But beyond that,
you show your age, John. But
just to show that all questions are on the table.
Yeah.
We're going to end with the controversial one. So
I know what you're going to ask.
yeah. So you recently made a little bit of news on coming out on the NRA and the after the school shootings and I understand what you were trying to do, but it was certainly not communicated that way in our wonderful press. I wonder if you might just expand on that and talk about your position, and then we'll open it up to everyone for questions.
Sure. Well, we, as most of you probably have heard or read, that Delta was called out. We went out on I don't think it was a limb, but people said that we were out on a limb with respect to taking position around gun control and Second Amendment rights. But following the Parkland shooting, I think a lot of us were really put off in a very major way by the caustic remarks that came out of the NRA. It was abrasive, and we can't allow this to continue. Gun control. We're big believers in Second Amendment rights, and people have lots of different opinions on it. We're also big believers in First Amendment rights too. That people have to have voice in this process, and we have to promote voices and allow voices to be heard. And coming out of that, we weren't the only company. There were quite a number of companies that decided that they were going to pull any kind of endorsement or seen as an endorsement of the NRA, just really to extract ourselves from the discussion. We felt that our brand, our company we shouldn't be taking positions one way or the other, but we do, and I didn't even know this at the time. I learned about it only a couple of weeks ago. We had a policy that for the NRA convention once a year, NRA members could apply and receive a 20% discount to travel to their convention. And it's small. As it turned out, only 13 people use it. I mean, this is kind of the crazy thing of it. So it was made this national headline for a week, and it was for 13 people. It was never something that small has ever gotten this amount of publicity ever. But we said that, and we looked at the website, and they had our name on the website. By the way, they misspelt our name.
Really?
Yeah, it's spelled there. You know, they didn't misspell Delta, okay.
Yeah, airlines, yeah.
But, you know, we're very sensitive, you know, airlines, we see, we're only on two words, is airlines. You know, anyone that's Delta knows that, you know. They combine the airlines into one word. They use different colors. It looked like amateur hour. And so we said, please take our name off your website. We don't want to be in this debate. We don't want to be in this process. And, you know, we're going to end, you know, we're not going to give any more discounts. So we're just going to stay out of it, okay? We don't want to be seen as implicitly endorsing the NRA. We don't also want to be seen as attacking the NRA. Well, unfortunately, in society today, we got viewed as we were attacking the NRA and holding NRA members accountable for what went on in Parkland, which is absurd. I mean, we're not doing that. We're never going to do that. But in the midst of all that happening, the Georgia State Legislature was finalizing a very, very large jet fuel tax exemption for Delta that would have saved us $40 million a year. In fact, they'd already approved it. And the governor was just about ready to sign it into law within a matter of days. So as soon as we made the decision to pull the NRA discount, we started becoming besieged by calls. And I've not seen an issue in my history of Delta that's elicited more response, both pro and con. And by the way, the emotions on both sides are extreme. It's just remarkable. And people were saying, you know, how can you do this? And other people saying, thank you for doing it, getting both sides of it. But within the Georgia State House, there was very active support for the NRA. And they said that if you do this, we're not going to give you the jet fuel tax exemption unless you reverse your policy. And in fact, the lieutenant governor tweeted that out. And you know, it's one thing to have a conversation about, well, is there a better way to eliminate your implied endorsement of the NRA? But when you get publicly threatened like that, it made it really easy for me. Say, no, we're not going to change our policy. And we told them that, you know, if you make your own decisions, we're going to make our decisions. As I said, we believe in the Second Amendment. We also believe in the First Amendment. And we're not going to let a state house dictate to us what we do. And our brand is more valuable than that. And that's what led to the decision. And you know, it was a hard decision, I've got to say. It was one of the more difficult ones I made. You know, when you turn down $40 million, which, you know, the governor, you know, and Governor Deal is a great governor. And I said that in my letter to our people. I mean, he's the one that got caught in the middle of this, and he's still trying to do the right thing on this. This wasn't the governor's fault at all. But he said, you're going to really turn down that kind of money? You know, it's $500 million over a 10-year time frame. And I said, yeah, we are. Because, you know, our values are not for sale. And this wasn't about economic gain. This is about standing for something you believe in, and standing for your brand, and standing for your cause. And I can tell you, public sentiment, by and large, by the way, we're not a Georgia company. We're headquartered in Georgia, but we travel around the globe. I can tell you, public sentiment has been probably 80 to 90% in our favor on this. Maybe not in some parts of Georgia, but I can tell you around the world, it's been overwhelming. And I can also tell you in the business community here, it's been overwhelming in support of Delta. And it's not, again, not about taking a position on the NRA. It's about not letting politics or not letting special interest try to dictate and let money buy off where you're going. And I said, you know, fortunately, we're in a position we don't need their money. And, yeah, and we stood by it. And I think we made an awful lot of fans by doing that, too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, knowing you, when I saw Casey Cagle's announcement come out, I said, this is not going to end well.
It's not going to end well.
I knew you wouldn't go back on anything like that with a threat. So
absolutely not.
Okay, let's open up for some questions, and looks like we have a mic or two floating around.
Good morning, Ed. Thank you for being here, first of all. I have a quick question, something that you didn't address. Can you tell us about your strategy around focus cities? So maybe some of the point-to-point flying that you guys are starting to get into?
Yeah, we've invested in a number of focus cities. Raleigh, Durham is one of those. We're investing heavily in Boston. We've invested, you know, Seattle at one point was a focus city. Now it's a real hub for us. Pittsburgh is one of those markets. Nashville, Indianapolis, a number of places. What we do is we look for mid-sized communities that have good business volumes, given the attractiveness of our business product, and we're working to continue to grow and expand. So the bulk of that flying is still to different hubs, but you know, we're concentrating enough resources in those communities, and it's you know, one way to grow in the U.S.
Lots of hands.
Oh, yes, hi.
Ed, part of the secret of your culture is the fact you're almost union-free, but you work hard at that. Talk a little bit about labor relations and your relationships with the unions.
Yeah. Well, we only have one union on the property, one main union, which is our pilots. And well, they've been unionized for years, and they'll stay unionized. And we have great relationship with our pilots. It's not just about unions or non-unions. And we have just a great relationship with our people. We prefer not to stereotype people in one way or the other way. But you know, you work hard to maintain that relationship. And what our people have repeatedly said to us is they don't want somebody standing between me and them, representing their voice. They want to have their voice direct to me, and I want to have my voice direct to them. And that's what I do. And I spend the majority of my day in front of employees all over the place, and I'm very, very visible and engaged. And they appreciate that because they want to know where the company is going. They don't want to have to pay someone to kind of try to get their voices heard. It allows us a lot more flexibility. You know, sometimes we can make changes without having to negotiate with a big union. Allows us to actually pay them more. Our employees are paid the very best in the industry because they don't have to worry about union dues or signing into long-term contracts and negotiating down. We can always negotiate up for our people. The profit sharing plan I mentioned at Delta, no airline, you know, they've got profit sharing plans, but you could add all the profit sharing for all the airlines paid last year. It doesn't come close to $1 billion. So they know they've got a great relationship. But it's not just the financial rewards. The rewards are a recognition of a job well done. It's really the personal engagement they have. And you know, one of the stories I'm most proud of as we went through the merger with Northwest is Northwest, as I think people know, was heavily unionized. It had very cantankerous relationships. It was cold, it was dark, it was nasty. You know, it was Northwest. That was their tagline. It's true, by the way. And we went up there, and you know, and the employees didn't trust anybody up there at Northwest. It was very difficult. You know, for a couple of years, they didn't quite believe us. You know, they thought we were just drinking Kool-Aid down here in the South, and you know, you guys are just going to say one thing and do another. And we've earned our way. And then by the time it came around having elections, because all of the employees in every single work group had to vote whether they were going to be unionized or not. We had 9 different categories of employees that voted. This goes back a few years. 50,000 people were voting in the combined company, whether flight attendants, mechanics. We won every one of those 9 elections. The employees collectively voted to be union-free. And it was the largest union organizing activity since the Ford Motor Company in 1940 at Delta. So we take great pride in that. And hopefully it shows in the service level. You know, people feel engaged, they feel responsible for doing a good job for you, and they feel rewarded for that. And they know that their management really does, you know, care and stands alongside them as they deliver that.
We have a mic over here, I think.
Hi, thanks for being here.
Sure.
I recently, last year, flew with a flight crew of 4 people that averaged 187 years of service with Delta. And, you know, I want you to keep the older people like
total,
that.
Or was that individual?
Yeah, really. Amazing, and they weren't even in a wheelchair. But no, I want you to look at those kind of people and you know, and keep them because they were the most efficient and fun flight we had, and I think most people felt that way. But my question is, as a diamond, you always send out a survey to us, and you ask us, and you know, those 4 people, certainly, you know, I would choose to hire them if I wanted to. But what can you speak on? What do you do with the surveys, and if our information comes to you all the time?
Yeah, it does. You know, we take those surveys, and thank you for filling them out. And I know sometimes it's a pain because we survey lots of people lots of times, but that's how we drive the business. The measure that we follow closely, that I follow most closely of our business, is what we call our Net Promoter Score. And that's a simple metric as to whether employees, you know, you rate us a 5, or if you're somewhat lukewarm or negative. And if you rate us a 5, you subtract the lukewarm to get your Net Promoter Score. And that measure continues to grow and continues to improve in our company, and we measure it around the world. Then we drill down to the specific areas, and those people that give us specific feedback, either at the gate experience or the flight attendant experience, then we'll take, and that information will then go directly to the managers of those respective areas as to how our customers feel we're doing in specific areas, whether it's the onboard food, which isn't always the best, and I realize a lot of things we can improve there, or or the service levels or the boarding experience. And so we have for every step of the process, we have a Net Promoter Score. We have an overall score, and then we have individual scores for each area. And then for employees that stand out, that want to be recognized, then we'll go in and we'll actually provide additional recognition to those employees. We'll share your comments with them. So the employees actually see the comments that our customers will make. We started doing that a few years ago, and it was an interesting process because not all of our customers are nice like you. You know, we have some not nice. We carry almost 200 million people a year. You got some real jerks, honestly. Not that many, but there's a few. And people will say not nice things about an experience, and our employees were starting to see those too, and it was really upsetting them, as anybody would be seeing those kind of comments. So we filter out the inappropriate remarks, but our employees, whether it's in the airport experience, reservations, on board, our pilots, they will see comments that you'll make, and then if it's a special situation where they've just gone above and beyond, we also recognize them. We give them points, and we give them what we call our Delta bonus points and whatnot. They can buy things with them, and they can be recognized. I get lots of emails, lots of personal emails from people around people doing special things, and I always make sure I personally follow up with the employee to thank them for that, and they get recognized for that. So yeah, we're big on getting people trained up to develop the experience and then reward them on the backside of that. And we're also hiring a lot of people. So while you're right, you've got a very experienced crew, and we're maintaining those crews. We're not looking to get rid of those crews at all. We're in the process of hiring 25,000 people over the next 5 years at Delta. So you know, and I'm always out recruiting for people. So anyone that knows somebody really good that wants to come work, just send me an email, and I'll make sure they get into the queue. We're hiring about 2,000 flight attendants a year now. We're hiring about 600-700 pilots every year. Hiring technologists, reservation agents, airport workers, mechanics. There's an awful lot of things. One of the things I've agreed to do in the city, I sit on the Atlanta Committee for Progress that works with the mayor, and I lead the workforce development initiative across the city. And we're still just getting together, but I've gathered up many of the top CEOs, Craig Manier from Home Depot, Bill Rogers from SunTrust, Dietmar from Mercedes, Klaus from Porsche. We got about 6 or 7 Paul Bowers with Georgia Power, and we're together, and we're saying we just cannot let the workforce that we have here in Atlanta continue to be underserved the way they are. We're not generating enough opportunities out of our city, and you're going to see a lot happen over the next couple of years coming from this group, working with the technical schools, working with the high schools, kind of backing all the way down into the elementary schools. One of the things I'm also real proud of is that we've adopted a couple schools, the Atlanta Public School System. We'll have a couple hundred people over the course of a week that sit and we've adopted kids, and they read with the kids, and they're near our campus down by the airport. And we're big in developing the workforce and the education, and a lot of it's self-serving because we need that talent for the future, and these are great jobs for the future. These are all well-paying jobs that we need to continue to develop. And unfortunately, most of the people we hire from outside Atlanta, and we need to step up the opportunities within the city.
You're bound to have a long line of people after this event.
Exactly. You can all send me emails.
And Ed, I guess I have a question for you, just right down front.
Oh, okay, see ya.
But yeah, Andrew Patilla, nice to meet you. I'm a second-year MBA student at
Great.
UGA, so privileged to have you here with
Sure.
us today. My question, I guess, is for a lot of the aspiring business people in the room. I guess if you could touch a little bit on what it's like to be a CEO, a day in the life maybe of someone in your position, and how can young business people aspiring to be CEOs, what can we be doing to prepare ourselves for that sort of a role in the future?
Wow, a day in the life. Every day is different. It's a cool job. I'll be honest with you, it's a cool job. Not quite sure how I got it, but I'm here and I'm going to take it. It's I had the great one of the proudest moments I had in my professional career was about 6 years ago, and I was invited by the Grady School to give the commencement speech because it was my daughter Brittany graduated from Grady 6 years ago. It was her class, and I gave the commencement speech at the Grady School, and it was really, really cool, and I loved it. I enjoyed it. And one of the things I said to the class was that you gotta follow your dreams. You gotta follow and have energy and passion about what you do. CEO of an airline. By the time I graduated from college, the small school I went to, I never stepped foot on an airplane. The first time I was on an airplane in my life, I was 25 years old. I was over several years out of school at that point. How would I have ever known that this is what I was being prepared for, in life? And so there's a lesson in there. There's a lesson about finding opportunities, taking a chance on yourself. I think a big part of my success is because I've got a lot of confidence. And it's earned, it's learned. You got to stay humble about it. One of the things I've also learned about this job is you got to stay incredibly. We're very proud of what we do. We're very proud, but we're a humble people. We had a. I'm just going to jump around a little bit on. We had a great. We've got an event we do every year that we honor our top 100 employees from around the world, and we call it our Chairman's Club. And it's a black tie event. We do it in our museum. It's gorgeous. The employees they're self-peer nominated. No management people. These are all just frontline employees from around. If you're named by your peers one of the top 100 amongst 80,000, you're pretty special. And we do it every year. And every year I get up and speak. And this past year I said I wanted to bring someone on the stage, and I'd never done this before. Bring an external person out there that kind of personifies. Kind of what we aspire to and what these people represent at our company. And I apologize. I know this is a Georgia function, but I brought Tim Tebow, and Tim's. I know but I don't like him either. I don't like in a Gator uniform, but I love him as a person, and he's a good friend of mine, and he personifies what it was, and our people were shocked. They didn't realize Tim Tebow to come out from behind. He's a huge flyer on us, his family, and the work they do in the Philippines and for orphanages, and it's just incredible. And the reason I picked him is that I look at him as he's a pretty humble person. He really is. He's a down-to-earth person, yet he's determined. He's a fighter. He's persistent. He's got high energy and kind of a will to succeed, and those are the two characteristics that I'd say if you want to look at getting your career ignited and continue to grow and propel yourself into the future, you've got to have that will, that determination to fight through whatever it is you're working on or whatever opportunities you see, to take a chance, believe in yourself, but also stay humble. Because people are not attracted to people that are bold and boastful and full of pride. People are attracted to people that are vulnerable and that are human, that are willing to be honest with themselves. And that's what I try to. I think who I am. I try to be that way, and I think that's what people can relate to. You want to be approachable. You want to have the courage to be yourself, and not try to pretend you're somebody else. And by the way, you don't always have to have all the answers. People like it when you don't have the answers, because and so that you can bring them into the journey. So there's a lot to be learned from a couple of those characteristics. Humble spirit, but a fierce determination. And they may sound in conflict a little bit, but they're really not. They're really not. Sure.
So probably, how many more can we do here? Just one more? Yeah. John O'Neill's like Mr. Punctuality, so he's going crazy over here.
Well, I guess I have the final question. Nice to meet you. It was a pleasure. Medallion flyer myself.
Thank you.
I think one of the things I noticed, right, with the regime change from you to Richard was that the consistency and execution was still there. So can you talk about a little bit what you learned from Richard?
Yeah, I learned a lot from Richard. A lot of it was around that operational excellence. Richard was he was an operator's operator. He loved getting into the details. He loved grinding. He loved getting under the car and under the hood of whatever issue it was and trying to figure out what's going on there. I'm a different person. That's not my background. I can do that. I'm very engaged in our operations, but we're taking the company to another level. And Richard was the ideal CEO for where we were at the time, because it was a broken airline that had a lot of parts that needed to be repaired and fixed, and kind of spent a lot of time on the operations. While Richard was doing that, I was spending a lot of time in New York. I was spending a lot of time overseas, building the commercial framework and the relationships for the future, and as well when we both did a lot of time with our employees. And it's that consistent execution operationally that we're never going to lose. That's the foundation gives us the ability to be everything I talked about today. And kind of maintaining that high quality of performance is one of the biggest things I learned from Richard. Absolutely.
Well, I suspect we could sit here all day, but probably in the life of CEO, you have other things to do
I got
today.
a few things to do, but this has been fun. Listen,
so-
I want to thank you all. I know we have a lot of heavy medallions, travelers, diamonds, people of all variety. I really appreciate your business. We're going to continue to make this a better company. One of the things I'm most excited about for our future is the pipeline of stuff we're building, the planes, the airports, the technologies, the digital experiences. We're nowhere close to where we are. You know, Delta is a huge consumer brand, and we got to be seen amongst the leading consumer brands, including the technology companies and everywhere else. You know, one of the things John mentioned, we had a lot of awards and recognition over the last number of years, but this past year is that Forbes had a survey, which we didn't even know about until we read the magazine. We were named the 11th most relevant brand in the U.S., Delta, of all brands. Okay, 11th, Delta was. And you know, we were there with Amazon, we were there with Facebook, we were there with Google, and I think there was only two true product companies, there were Starbucks and Nike, that were ahead of us. And and that's how we think about our company. We think about our company as a brand that's relevant, that's got a face to it, that appreciates what you do for us, and we're going to keep working really, really hard to make it a better experience and to continue to be there and grow and build out Atlanta every way we can.
Good, thanks. Well, Ed, I want to thank you, and you're a good friend, and I've enjoyed watching you take Delta where it is, and I think everybody in here can see you're going to keep climbing.
Yeah,
and
I'm passionate about it.
And we appreciate you being here today.
Thanks,
John.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Ed, thank you so much for spending time with us this morning. You know, John mentioned it, but we're so fortunate to have Delta headquartered here in Atlanta. The impact that the company makes is just immeasurable. But we're also very fortunate to have Ed Bastian at the helm of that company. And there's a lot of young people in the room who are in school and be graduating soon. You need to try to find a CEO like Ed Bastian, who believes in the culture, who believes in the values. There's a direct correlation between the financial performance that Delta enjoys and the leadership seat that Ed sits in every day. So, Ed, thank you once again for being with us today. So, Ed, this is not for Tim Tebow. This is for you. This is a. Thank you. Yes, we love that. But this is a small token of our appreciation. The sculpture from Loretta Eby for you. And then, so next month, Steve Fisher, CEO of Novellus. You can get your parking validated there at the registration table on your way out. Thanks, and have a great rest of the day.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Thanks, John.
Excellent. Yeah, really terrific. Thanks so much.
That's very kind.
Yeah, this is for you. That's awesome. Yeah. Love that.